Yeah, good morning from my side as well. Thank you for having me. My name is Sebastian Lehnhoff, and aside from the nice things that this slide says about me, I'm also a member of the office. Board Office is a research and development institute. We target mainly industry and company-oriented R&D, and we are one of the largest groups doing ICT and energy systems, so from artificial intelligence, data science, simulation, and especially testing of communication information technologies before discoms, DSOs put them into the field, we provide the facilities. Today I was asked to talk a little bit about the topic of cyber security, not to scare you, but basically to raise awareness and briefly mention some of the best practices that we have been developing and come across together with our industry partners, DSOs, as well as software vendors and distributors for SCADA systems, for OT and so on. To briefly get you into the mood, so we already heard about this already, classic ICT infrastructure in systems driven now with the advent and installation of much more distributed, decentralized energy systems, which have to be monitored, automated, and ultimately integrated in your own, if you have them SCADA systems, but at least in your OT, IT environments that you already have into place. In addition to that, we will see, and we just heard about aggregators. Yesterday we talked about virtual power plants and so on, service providers who might connect to these devices themselves, do their own operation, have their own operation control room, system, software for these kinds of things, and in the end introduce at least a second ICT infrastructure in this. And ultimately, when we talk about Internet of Energy, IoT and all these things, ultimately everything is connected to the internet. And this obviously, and has been addressed yesterday already, poses a challenge in the context of cybersecurity, because now you have an open system. We know from other domains, from our laptops, computers, even our mobile phones, that we now have the issue of doing security management. IT security, classic means of keeping our system safe, and that holds true and becomes increasingly more important for our energy systems as well. And that means that in the future, classic discoms, DSO system operators of these infrastructures have to deal with IT security, not only with infrastructure, so with primary technology, but also with software updating, software models, information models, security of software application interfaces, so something that's fairly new for us, for people in the industry, and obviously outside of the comfort zone. And we will see that this becomes an increasing challenge, not only in classic industrial communication and computation systems, but especially also in energy systems. This figure, 0.5%, is fairly low, but we will see, and we saw an increase in this in the last years. So with ever more digitalization is the message here, we will also see an increase in these issues that we have with cybersecurity in the field. And in India, this morning I learned you have this, just recently had a problem with ICT or IT attacks on a power plant. We have these all over Europe as well. Message is, it has to be dealt with. Yeah, and the question is, how do you typically deal with this? This is actually IT Security 101. Security is a process. It's not something that you do once and you have a secure system, but basically you have to apply specific or classic processes. And that's actually the classic plan, act, prove or check and adjust. The classic PDCA process that's in place basic in every major IT security system or IT system that's driving a critical infrastructure all over the world. And it boils down to these 4 steps, and whether or not you are using what you see on the right here, classic standard like 31000 or 27001, classic standards that you know that you have in India as well, or that you apply in India as well. It first starts with accept the responsibility. You have a problem, you're running a safety critical infrastructure, an energy system that provides and supplies many people, many customers who are basically dependent on the service that you provide to them. You have to plan and document the security measures, and we talk about this briefly in just a second. You have to identify the assets that need to be secured, which is different if you're not talking about a single ICT system or IT system, but a rather diverse, really vastly spread out system with multiple sensors in the field. So basically everything of this becomes critical, but it needs to be documented. You need to come up with processes to secure every perimeter of your system. And then you have to implement those measures, what those might be, I will talk about in just a minute, and then you have to validate them. And that means that you just don't have to validate them yourselves. You have to do and activate third parties to do this for you. Because a very famous quote, and I'd like to put this on every slide that I have, it's attributed to Schneier, who's one of the famous figures in IT security, says that anyone can invent a security system so clever that he or she cannot think of how to break it. So that's not the issue here. To invent or that you feel secure but have others scrutinize your system and make sure that they cannot penetrate it. Because you, in the end, you don't want to penetrate and attack your own system. It's the other ones, and they have to be kept outside of their system. Yeah, so what are these security measures that we actually now have to put in place? And I'm not going to talk about all of them. If you look at them from your everyday computer systems that you have at home, and even from your mobile phone that everyone here in the room has and carries around, you know these security measures. And I'd like to put emphasis on two of them, which is basically security and patch management and backup and restore. Also something that you know from your mobile phone, so you get regular software updates. For example, I get daily updates for most of my apps. Restore and backup is also something that gets automatically done in the cloud, and if I get a new phone, I can easily set it up with an old image. So there's a backup system in place, there are established processes, and now the question is, why do you treat your phone as a more critical infrastructure than your power system? Because honestly, no power system, no energy system in the world has a security and patch management system in place. And that's not just true for India, Asia, that's also very true for our European energy systems. So for example, if you put a system, a protection system, a control system into place, you have to assume that is vulnerable and that there are known vulnerabilities to the system and to the device as soon as you install it in place. And there is honestly no established, no standardized process now for updating a device in the field, which is obviously very hard if you're talking about infrastructure, software updates and protection system updates, because honestly, if you're changing the functionality of something as critical as a protection system, you would in theory have to get it out there, test for its functionality and put it back in. It's a huge effort and you really cannot afford it for every system in such a distributed system. But again, it's a necessary, a classic security feature, and one of the most critical ones in every safety critical infrastructure nowadays, and that is so true for the energy systems. Backup and restore is also very important, and even if you say you have backup strategies in place, actually think about, do you have a strategy for restoring this? So once things really hit the fan, do you know how to systematically reinstate and reinstall security updates, not updates, the backups that you in advance saved somewhere back on your system? And honestly, you don't have, because industry in the energy sector doesn't have these processes. And again, that's very important. If you look at the knowledge paper that has been distributed yesterday on digitalization and cybersecurity, there was this huge issue of quantum computing, saying that the advent of quantum computing hits and breaks our cryptography. Honestly, you don't need quantum computers to penetrate and compromise an energy system nowadays. It's just you hit the weakest link, and there are so many because you never update an energy system, especially not OT devices, because there are no established processes to do so, which is something that all of you should be very critical about and have to think about. Yeah, let's theorize that we could save or secure our system. So in the end, it's this layered cake that, for example, looking at the system, which is the classic architecture, model, process, protocol, implementation, and then you have something on top of this running as an application, and you would be able to secure everything of this. It still is a problem or the challenge, the huge challenges that your ICT system for running your critical infrastructure is always context dependent. So you're running not just your system yourself, but you're running basically distributed units, you're running prosumers, we just heard about demand-side management flexibility devices in the field, and they also are systems that are directly connected to your system world, and regardless of how secure your system might be, in the end, there's just one missing or weak link in the field that doesn't apply or implement all these security measures, and again, it's compromised, and there's a chance that you might get affected by this weak link in your system. What does it tell us? Honestly, that we cannot assume a system, and that goes for any system, not just the energy system, ever to be 100% secure. Again, that's not to scare you, but again, to press and emphasize that you have to be prepared, that you have to have strategies in place to deal with outages, with these events, with attacks on your system, with having and the need of having backup and restore processes to get your system back up running again in the case that eventually someone is actually attacking your system, and we have to deal with this. Yeah, how are we dealing with this in Europe, in Germany? We have a couple of years back started an industry consortium with concerned with the development of safety critical, not just software, but system architectures, and it's a lot of standardization. It's not just processes, but also thinking about if you have a system that's set up of subsystems coming from different vendors, in the end you have to secure and implement processes across this cross-vendor ecosystem, and that's difficult in any case, and it's especially difficult for DISCOMs and DSOs, and this Open Consequence Consortium, which I have the pleasure of serving as a CTO here, we basically stem from and derived a lot of open source development processes, not just the license open source, but if you look at the community, many of these processes, development, update, software maintenance, and system maintenance processes stem and follow the idea that you are providing something that is used in a larger ecosystem by different vendors and partners, and if you detect something or are changing something to your system, it needs to be inherited by all the other systems. And there's something to learn from. We learned many, many things. We published a lot of these things, especially security, quality assurance, quality safety standards on a very technical level to really tell you what to do and how to develop your systems. And we are following this with a lot of DSOs and industry partners in the development of these systems. Yeah, so that's some best practices and some conclusions for you. Be aware that IoT is very prominent, Internet of Energy is also very prominent, and I'd like to point out that the S in the acronym and abbreviation stands for security. Obviously that's a pun saying that there is no security in place. Again, I just talked about this. It's implement and follow the standards, even though I just said you never can be 100% sure, but first step was accept responsibility. Follow the standards, implement them, even though they cannot protect you 100%. It's not a loss. So it's not lost investment in implementing and follow the standards. They are costly, yes, but they help you to get a cutting edge and advantage if the incident happens, to get your systems back up and running again to resupply your customers. And even though sometimes I get approached and asked, so if this is all that critical and digitalization opens up doors and security fronts and so on, so why am I doing this in the first place? Because we need it. We have distributed systems, we need to monitor, we have to forecast them, we have to optimize them in terms of energy efficiency, even in terms of optimality, and it opens up a chance for a more resilient system because, again, regardless if we have these systems in place or not, we will never have a fail-proof system. But digitalization, such as these devices, flexibility in place, can help you to have a more resilient system. And that's basically what I wanted to raise awareness. If you're really interested in this, go to the webpage. Unfortunately, it's a German webpage, but all the documents and reports are in English. So if you're interested in this, feel free to contact me, and I can directly get you in contact with the proper material. And that's for that topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you so much.